everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is very very important. We will discuss on economic singularities, and here is our scientific writer. They published a new book. They will discuss about their book, and most importantly, economic singularity is very very important for emerging economy. You know that World Talent Economy Forums. We already started our research institution for artificial intelligence with North South University, with University of Western Australia, with National University Singapore, and SP Jayan Dubai. So for that particular issues, we have a huge youth engagement as well as we have many scientific audience around Asia Pacific. So hopefully today's discussion will be very impactful for our audience. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Mike, what you want to discuss about your book today.
Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for having us on. The book is called Future Visions. And what we are trying to do is talk about the economic singularity and what perhaps we could do about it. And if for those of who don't know quite what I'm talking about, it was this excellent book by Callum Chase entitled The Economic Singularity. That's where the term comes from. And in it, he explained, about 7 years ago, that there was a chance that cognitive automation, the combination of artificial intelligence and robotics, could likely lead to a lot of permanent technological unemployment. Many, many people across the world, millions and millions, losing their job permanently. And prior to this book, it was pretty well understood that robotics was going to be on the auto assembly line, robots in a fixed position, putting in parts repeatedly, very simple tasks, mechanical tasks. And what Callum Chase pointed out is that with the rise of more capable artificial intelligence, they would be able to do reasoning and make choices. And they could do a lot of the same sort of jobs that normal people do, not just blue collar, white collar service jobs. And he went into things like the lawyers that were likely to be losing their jobs because the artificial intelligence would be more cost effective. Computer programmers could be more cost effective. And so a couple years ago, I started this group, the Omni-Futurist group, because when I looked at not just that book by Callum Chase, I looked at this one called A World Without Work by Daniel Susskind. This is David Wood's favorite version. There was Aaron Bastani's Fully Automated Luxury Communism, and Andrew Yang's The War on Normal People. What we found was a long series of books that said there is a problem coming, and there was a lot of doubt about that. Well, what I could not find was any attempt at planning what should we do in response to this? How should the world respond to the loss worldwide of millions and millions of jobs? So the Omni-Futurists were gathered together because I didn't want to settle on a single version of what would be the right way to do it. I wanted a diverse array of opinions. And so what we did is the 10 of us wrote 10 different chapters with different perspectives. And just as a quick example, one author, Zach Richardson, is a very pure capitalist. And the title of his chapter kind of gives it away. He says, the rich get richer and the poor get richer. He said that capitalism raised everybody's living standards. On the other side of the house, we've got Luis Arroyo wrote, he's a socialist, so he wrote Socialism 2.0. He feels that the real problem is not production. We've got an overabundance of what we need. It's distribution. And the way to fix that is to have central ownership of the means of production. And in the middle, we were very fortunate to convince a famous transhumanist author, David Wood, to join us. And he is a proponent of the mixed market, a combination like you have in a lot of countries of capitalism and a social safety net, right? There's others of us who believe that governments aren't going to prepare properly. And therefore, we individually have to prepare. So, Kimberly Forsyth, some of you will remember her from years ago. She was a presidential candidate for the United States Transhumanist Party. She wrote about the universal basic means of production, where neighborhoods or small towns could have a shared supply of tools in order to make things, 3D printers, vertical farming. Um, I did a version where people who were unemployed could collect together into small farm worker owned co ops in order to co house and co work and just kind of survive, rather than living unemployed in a tent on the sidewalk. Okay, so the book Future Visions is now available on Amazon, and an array of possible solutions to the economic singularity. I'm joined today by other authors of the chapters. I'll yield the floor so they can have a chance to talk about their chapters. Okay, thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. William.
Yes, Dr. Sharif.
Yeah, what you want to discuss about your chapters, or we know more about your chapter?
Yes, thank you. Well, my argument is against the people that think that there will be an abundance, automation, the economic singularity will make everything free, so everybody will be prosperous without having to work. The economic singularity is coming, and eventually all jobs will be replaced by robots and artificial intelligence. However, it's crucial to recognize for the economic singularity to occur, technology does not have to be free, it just has to be cheaper than human labor. In my opinion, goods and services will never be free and will become less affordable as our wages drop to zero. In order to prove this point, I'll go through the 4 factors of production one by one and discuss how they. The value of everything comes from 4 factors: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. First of all, land for agriculture. Technology can make land more intensive farming more practical. You could have vertical farming. I know some places in Japan they grow gourmet strawberries in tall racks, or you could have racks of tilapia pools growing fish, but it'll still be cheaper to farm in fields and raise fish in ponds. However, it can make marginal land more cost effective. Right now in North America, you have these huge combines that can make massive swaths down a grain field because they need a big machine because they have to pay for the labor of the guy to drive it. Now, if they didn't have a driver, you could have smaller machines and that could drive over more uneven land because those big machines need land that's very flat. But you could make better use of marginal land if you didn't have to pay the driver. So you would see a flattening of real estate values. The prime land would be cheaper, but the marginal land could be more expensive. Also, you could have really hilly land that could have automatic landscaping that could build terraces around it. Terrace farming's been around for 1,000 years, but it's only cost effective in areas where labor is very cheap. Automated machines could make that cheap. So you could see more land come into production because of automation. COVID had some pretty big impact on real estate values, on land values. As soon as COVID hit, we couldn't go to retail shopping anymore. We had to buy everything online. So the value of retail real estate dropped, but the value of warehouse land increased because Amazon was building warehouses all over the place. So that was like a sneak preview on what's going to happen when technology is suddenly thrust upon us. And at the same time, people didn't have to go, they work from home, so they didn't have to go downtown to work in the office. So office values dropped. They didn't have to live downtown, so downtown apartment values dropped. But then in the suburbs, the real estate values stayed the same, or some markets it actually increased since you didn't have to live downtown anymore. But land will still have a value even after the economic singularity. Labor, that's where the main impact is going to be. But how much labor does it take? Currently, labor costs are about 20 to 35% of gross sales, depending on the industry. Labor for trucking is lower than other expenses for trucking. The major expense for trucking right now is actually the cost of the truck and the return on investment for the guy that has to buy the truck. And then there's fuel, there's insurance, there's maintenance, and labor is actually the cheapest cost of driving a truck. So if you get automated vehicles and labor is free, it'll just have a small difference on the cost of trucking. So you're still going to have some expenses there. Also, robot and AI has costs of their own. It may not be labor, it'd be classified as a capital expense, and I'll get into that later. But those things are still very expensive. And as I mentioned before, the singularity doesn't mean that AI and robotics are free. It just means that it's cheaper than human labor, and it'll put a lot of people out of work. Farming productivity has been increasing for centuries, but the labor cost of growing grain in Canada is only 2% of grain costs. So if labor drops to zero, it'll only decrease the cost of grain by 2%. Manufacturing on average is 16% goes to labor. They've made a lot of progress in automation. The Japanese started it on their assembly lines back in the 1970s, and I just read an article that in 2022, Nissan started a factory, automobile factory with very few laborers. In the past, you still had to have people keep an eye on the machines, but now the machines have cameras and artificial intelligence, and they can correct their own errors, their own quality control, and so factories will have very few people in it. However, that is difficult, and in the same period of time, Tesla tried to fully automate their assembly line, and it was a failure, and they had to go back to using robots made out of meat. Restaurants on average have 30% labor costs, and we've seen a couple of examples of fast food restaurants that have tried to automate or partially automate. It works best when the food comes pre-processed. So there are some possibilities for reducing labor there. Healthcare and education have huge labor costs. And there's some huge advances in artificial intelligence. For example, they have a AI program that can look at x-rays and can find cancers better than a doctor can. It's not quite going to replace doctors. So far, it's an enhancing technology rather than a replacing technology. So it's a tool that doctors can use to help them spot some of these smaller tumors. But it's advanced so quickly that you have to imagine that in a few years that it may come to the point where it completely replace that doctor. And that will be a large drop in labor costs in healthcare. Education has a huge labor component. For public schools in Canada, the cost of labor is 59% of the cost of education. Now, children, they really need that human contact. So it's going to be a long time before teachers for small children are going to be replaced by robots or AI. But there is a lot of opportunity in universities. And right now, a university lecture may have 200-300 students. Well, with online, why not have 10,000 students? And then their papers could be marked by artificial intelligence. The students could have AI tutors. So there is some potential for higher levels of education to reduce labor costs. But as I said, it's going to be a while before we replace teachers for the kids. Robert G. Gordon demonstrated in his best-selling book, The Rise and Fall of American Growth, that from 1999 to 2007, increases in unemployment were mainly for lower-income workers. Lately, we've seen layoffs at major tech companies, but large increases in employment for low-paid jobs. Low productivity means no wage increases. Capital. What is capital? Well, that's when you buy something to make money. If you buy a truck for yourself, that's not capital. If you buy it for your business, that is capital. In the future, more spending on capital will be used for artificial intelligence and robotics. But the cost of artificial intelligence is really expensive. And large language models such as ChatGPT-4 use between 16,000 and 25,000 NVIDIA A100 GPUs, and they cost $10,000 a piece. So for the cost of GPUs alone, it would be between 160 million and 250 million. Chips for Midjourney cost almost 40,000 each. Bleeding edge computing hardware will still continue to be expensive, and increases in quality keeps prices from dropping. Robotics has been slow, but it may speed up. Uh, Artificial intelligence is increasing very rapidly. Robotics increases slowly, but robots are getting much smarter. So we may see some more rapid increase in robotics progress. So capital will continue to be spent on more effective and expensive robots and AI. So capital will not be free in the economic singularity. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is payment for the risk and ability in investing. Ability can be replaced by AI, but will still be very valuable. An example of entrepreneurship is stock trading. Since the 1990s, stock traders have used algorithms to help them beat the market and give them an advantage. But it becomes an AI arms race where the winner takes most. You see, Microsoft is first to get the AI, and their profits are soaring. Up 40, the Magnificent Seven companies' profits are up about 48% this year, but the average company in the US has maybe increased 4%. So it's a real arms race, and the winner takes most of the profits. And so we'll see a greater concentration of wealth as a result. Entrepreneurs still seem to be getting paid for business expertise, even if their only contribution is creating the best artificial intelligence program. Now, what happens if robots break free? What if they decide they don't need humans anymore? What could happen? Maybe they'll decide that a well-fed human is less dangerous than a hungry human, and they'll give us food. How would they deal out the food? Who knows? Would they have us line up? Would they just decide who needs what? Well, the future is very uncertain, and nobody really knows how that would play out. But in conclusion, human labor will be replaced by AI and robots eventually, but incomes will drop to zero. So products will become less expensive, but we still won't be able to afford them if we have zero income. The singularity will bring steady deflation. Without government intervention, poverty will be widespread, and without some kind of taxation and redistribution of wealth, people will be shut out of the economy with no source of income. Thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. What you want to discuss about your chapter? Can you unmute, please?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. This is a great program, and I have enjoyed the World Talent Forum. So thank you for bringing me and the rest of the folks from this book on. I think I'm honored. Let's just say that. What I'd like to say about my chapter is, I kind of made an acronym of the upcoming economic singularity, the TUES, and then I added the word day to that. You get Tuesday, and it reminded me of a lot of the Mayan calendar prophecy and the various religious Armageddon prophecies, and we think about these things. We think they might come, and typically they come and go like any other Tuesday. And I would really like to think that's what's going to happen with the AI-driven economic singularity. However, I'm not nearly that optimistic, and I'm pretty sure there will be some serious consequences to our economic systems. I think our economic systems are overdue for some changes. We've improved our manufacturing, our communications, our information resources, all of these things in a variety of ways, and those have not necessarily taken full effect. This meeting that we're on here with StreamYard is a great example of that. As early as 1999, Skype had effective video conferencing, and yet it really took another 20 years for something like the pandemic. What I thought would make Skype a household name actually obliterated them. They weren't ready for the real transition to major marketing, and the Zoom kind of became the name. StreamYard does an amazing job also. And so those kind of things, I mean, those technologies have been in place for decades and are only just now being brought to the forefront of people's use and utility and imagination even right now, 20 years after their inception. And so that sort of brings me to the point of the economic singularity. I think there's a vast amount of technological advances in logistics and manufacturing and construction techniques, space exploration that we have not capitalized on. And a lot of that is simply because people are in the habit of doing business a certain way, and we continue to do things the way they've always been done, even if that's just the way they've been done for the last 50 years or so. So on that note, with all that aside, as a precursor to how things happen and how I see them developing, I wanted to bring in my chapter the thoughts of preparing for the economic singularity. And one of the things I learned as 30 years in the military and being a military planner is you have to plan for success as much as is required to plan for failure. If our system breaks down, we need a plan. And a lot of people think, well, if it's status quo, you don't really need a plan for that. However, it's good to have a plan for the status quo, because the better that you understand the status quo, the better you can take advantage of what's going on in the world. In other words, as in any case, the better one understands the reality and the environment, the better decisions one can make about living in that reality and environment. And our environment changes. So we know the status quo will not be the status quo forever. And I think there's some sort of, I don't want to characterize it as immature thinking or poor thinking, but sort of surface level thinking about preparing for disaster. There's some things that are like tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, those type of disasters. People can very much, who live with those things, right? The folks that live along the San Andreas fault line in California or in the hurricane zone in Florida, or the tornado alley in the central United States. Those people are very smart about adapting to those specific types of known disasters that come regularly, destroy things, and we recover from them. There's very much, a cycle of events. There's no cycle, or if there is a cycle, this will be the first iteration of an artificial intelligence, certainly a general intelligence that comes along, and we really don't know what that will entail. So there's one aspect is preparing for the unknown, and the other aspect is preparing for, or let's say rapid change, and the other one is incremental change. And along those lines, I think a lot of sort of surface level thinking is that as things change, whether it's incrementally or whether it's a massive rapid change, there will either good things will come from it or bad things will come from it. And I'd suggest that kind of sort of the bastardized Shakespeare's quote, things are neither good nor bad, but utility makes them so. And I think the really savvy investors know that when certain stocks plummet, that's not the time to sell, that's the time to buy. Just like, when you go to the grocery store, the time to buy tuna is not when the price has just been hiked up, but when it's on sale. Because tuna is going to sit in the can, it's going to be on the shelf for as long as you need it. And if you can get it cheaper now than later, that's fantastic. So I think it sort of just depends on how you navigate the upcoming changes. Again, rapid changes in the cataclysmic event or incremental changes from either success or decline. So there are certain things to look at in the case of any disaster, and our best predictors for most natural disasters are what's happened before. Like I said earlier, this is not a natural disaster, and it'll surely be the first repetition if it is a multi-repetition event. So what I focused on in my chapter is building a set of skills that will help in this sort of lead up to the singularity, where AI is an amazingly useful tool. Learn some AI skills, learn how it applies to one's job. For writers, to use it as a writing tool, for artists as an artistic tool, for logistics planners as a planning tool. AI is an amazing and helpful tool. And the better one learns a facility with it, the better they will be able to adapt to future changes of artificial intelligence. So that's sort of step one. I would say get on board and embrace AI and the beneficial changes that this amazing tool has made. Sort of like the 80s, those computers, those are a fad, right? And then, like later we developed the internet, and oh my gosh, I can't stand to hear that scratchy noise when the computer logs in to the 300 baud rate, internet. That thing, it's a fad, right? Of course, those computers and the internet have drastically changed our lives, and cellular phones, it's just putting the internet on the phone. That's going to be a fad. Well, now people do more business on their phone than they do on their computer or in person. So those are pretty amazing transitions that have occurred over the last 40 years. And we're still sort of making incremental changes and doing business as usual. So for the rate of change to speed up much faster than that, and I wish I had the books to hold up like Mike did earlier. I've steadily replaced my hard copies with digital ones. But Alvin Toffler's book from the late 70s, where he talks about future shock and an increasing rate of change. We went from hunter-gatherer for thousands of years to the agricultural era for a few thousand years to the industrial era, and then within just a few hundred years, we're landing on the moon. We went from Kitty Hawk to the moon in about 80 years. So those type of changes are happening faster. We are communicating faster. We are spreading technology around the globe faster. And we are also manufacturing things faster. So those increased abilities in the way things change will be hard for us to grasp without, for example, a tool like AI to help us deal with those monumental data flow of how much change actually happened from when I went to bed last night to when I woke up this morning. I'd like to get that in a briefing, please, AI. Thanks. All right, for bringing me up to speed. Now let's get some work done. And I think at some point, yes, we will transition into artificial general intelligence linked to highly effective manufacturing capacity with first, like say, fixed position robots, to general purpose manufacturing robots, to nano construction bots. And these things will continue to enable that pace, and we'll have a general intelligence, artificial general intelligence, that will be able to make decisions more rapidly and with better data than we can. And at that, of course, that is the singularity point where all bets are off. Like all of our calculations, sort of hit the wall right there. We're not sure what's going to happen after that. So, to link this back to personal disaster planning, yes, you want a skill set for getting closer and closer to that singularity. And I would suggest that it's not just the high-tech skill set, but also it's a set of hobbies and a study of the humanities, things that make us truly human. And part of that would be, for example, gardening. What a great hobby. Growing one's own vegetables. Will there be more productive land out there? Absolutely. But it will never be as rewarding as the soil I tilled right outside my kitchen door that I can pluck a fresh tomato or jalapeno pepper from and put it into night's salad, or trade with my neighbor for an egg, or whatever the case may be. Those type of community relationships and personal effort for personal reward type of endeavors, art for art's sake, music for music's sake, storytelling just to tell compelling stories. I think all those things are part of what make us human. And sure, you can bet artificial intelligence will be writing fantastic screenplays for movies, but right now they are just derivatives. Well, and for most of Hollywood and Bollywood, those are mostly derivative movies too, from sources that are already out there. But there are some great breakthroughs every now and then, and there are some truly creative movies, and that is the best of what humans bring. So, to recap, there is that skill set that keeps one aligned with artificial intelligence and automation, and I think those are really important for people to develop, whatever their job is. Secondly, some sort of hobby, something that you love to do that has absolutely nothing to do with the things that machines are good at. I think that's important, so that if you are overcome by you end up where you have nothing to do because you're out of a job. Well, your job is not the only thing about you that you have some other hobby. You like to sew, you like to make handcrafts, you like to brew your own mead, which involves first growing your own honey, right? So you got to have bee tending and all those things. So that's that second skill set, and I call it really a hobby skill set. And then third is about building communities, just like we're doing here, and that's part of my efforts in this book. Is I think that people need to first, like say, align their own. What I use the term in the chapter is getting one's house in order. So I want to get rid of my debt, so I'm not caught in arrears during the economic singularity. I want to get rid of my independence, or I want to not get rid of my independence. I want to become independent from other factors like debt is probably the main economic one, but also I want to be able to reach my friends and family on an electric bike, right? So it's nice to have friends and family that are close by, that kind of community, and that doesn't mean just moving them to my location or joining them at their location. I also include making friends out of your neighbors, whether they're family or not. You never know, the person. I mean, my grandparents lived in Corpus Christi and received multiple hurricanes. And my grandfather would go and he had a chainsaw, and he would go and he would help everybody cut down their limbs. Cut down the limbs of the trees that had been blown down. He did that every time there was a hurricane. He went out and did that. And he's kind of known for that. He was a CPA also. So that was kind of his, bread and butter. But when out of the blue, a lightning strike hit the tree in their backyard and it fell on their house and crushed a room, right? The whole neighborhood came out to help them clear that house. And he and my grandmother were kind of overwhelmed at the outpouring of help, but they were like, hey, you were always there with a chainsaw after every tornado or tropical storm that came through, and it just amazed him. I, as a grandkid, I wasn't there for the event, but as I went down to Corpus Christi later, I got to see the pictures and meet some of the neighbors. So it impressed upon me this idea of community is who you live next to. But in this modern age, community is also people across the globe. Dr. Sharif, it's just amazing to be able to reach around the globe with this kind of information and create niche communities that are all focused on the same issue. So me particularly, I like seasteading, and there are seasteaders all over the globe. I'm interested in space and space travel, and I communicate with folks in Australia and Japan about space travel also. So, as well as across the United States, and one friend who works with ESA, the European Space Agency. So these are just amazing communities to be involved in. So anyway, I guess my point of all that is there's a lot more. I think anybody who's retired knows you're probably more busy once you're retired than you were when you had a job. And so I'm ready for machines to put me out of work. But I think there will always be plenty to do. So I've been rambling on for a while, but my main point here is, get your house in order, get yourself in physical fitness, and be ready for changes, and then keep your eye open for the changes, and look at how humans will profit from the changes. And I don't necessarily mean like, how am I going to make a buck on the next AI thing? Although if you're 20, that's probably a good place to be looking. But I mean, just in general, especially for us older folks, how will humanity, I think it's up to us to look at how will this benefit humanity, and how are we going to guide those things into a system that will produce beneficial results around the globe? And I'll close there. I think it's one of the greatest things that can happen is that we bring these tools of AI to good use around the globe. And my personal efforts in this book have been toward making that happen. And I'm so glad Mike reached out to me with the omni-futurist idea. I'd seen lots of think tanks, and I was like, oh yeah, there's this kind of think tank and that kind of think tank, but I really don't see any that say, maybe we ought to bring together good ideas from everybody's think tank, right, and see how they play out. That's what Mike's idea is here, and I love to see that clash of ideas, or network of best practices. So yeah, here's me signing off. I've talked enough, and I love. I want to hear about Art's chapter. I enjoyed reading it, and I like hearing him talk about it. So
excellent, Mr. Art Ramon. You are very famous in social media for your art design. So, what you want to share about your chapter?
Well, thanks for having me on the show again. I think this is my third time. In my particular chapter, I suggest using art as a means of helping sort of the people who are displaced get through this difficult time. And this isn't just an idea for the people, but it's an idea for politicians. So, humans are innately very creative. There are a lot of people today right now, if they could pay their bills off and quit their work and do what they want to do, they would become artists. But they can't, because it's just not profitable right now. So what I suggest is, in the future, when there's a lot of people unemployed, there's going to be certain safety nets here in this country, like unemployment. And what I want is the government to sort of amplify that with a federal program. They kind of did that during the COVID. There was a bit of federal amplification of jobless benefits. So I kind of want them to sort of do that and allow people to become artists, the people who've always wanted to become artists. So, and then create certain programs where, basically, I like the term that one of our co-authors said, it was beautify the commons. So, rather than people becoming hopeless and depressed and then lash out and destroy their environment, they're going to beautify it. So they're going to create art murals, is kind of the big thing because it's highly visible. So murals and large public sculptures. And then I also suggest ideas of, paying artists to do smaller works, like I do on canvas. And yeah, it's. I came up with this idea not knowing that the government had already done this. I didn't know about back during the Depression here in the U.S. FDR had a lot of what I thought were just infrastructure projects to get people to work. Uh, but apparently they had one for artists. So it was under the Works Progress Administration. They had the Federal Art Project. So this project, it paid artists to basically create any sort of art they wanted to, and it was just kind of like the idea I had, creating murals, creating small works of art. They also set up, community art centers and whatnot. Uh, and I assume somewhere along there they probably had maybe paying people to be instructors, art instructors, which is probably one of the ideas I'm going to put in my next revision, is to also pay people who are currently artists and maybe don't want to do a mural, to pay them to become, art teachers. So art teachers for people who want to develop their skills, and they've always wanted to be an artist, but they never took that route and never had the opportunity to develop their talent. So you're going to need art teachers to help people with that. So on top of that, you would have the community art centers. You'd have new instructors, so people would get paid to teach people art skills. So and this idea, it does require sort of government. It's going to be sort of a government program. But I think this is an idea that politicians should consider. The thing is they need to know about it, and it's going to, prevent a lot of, I think, just social disorder. If you have a lot of people who are unemployed, they don't have money, they're going to be desperate, and even if they get food and shelter, they're going to be idle, idle hands. And they could get into trouble, when they don't have something, when they don't have a life purpose to pursue. So that's what I, propose, is give people the purpose, that artistic pursuit. And along with this, this is for the people who cannot, become reemployed. There are other people who become reemployed through, infrastructure projects. Suppose, the government decides to do hyperloop across the entire nation. Well, there were people who get into the construction work. That's great, But for the people who aren't construction workers, becoming an artist might be a thing. And it's not just the visual arts; it's also the performance arts. I suggest, performance artists, whether it's dance or music or anything to that effect, to also give them a stage. Create events. The government would have to, subsidize an event and, have the venue there for performance artists, to pay a coffee shop to allow a venue for people who want to read their poetry, who want to do poetry slams, and just create this new economy where, artists, these people who become artists get a little extra money in their pocket to create the art, but they also buy other people's artwork. So it starts to grow this little economy of art where people start to support each other. So that's what I envisioned. Eventually, successful artists will be able to commercialize, their artwork. So suppose they create a mural, well, then you can sell prints of this mural, and they can, further commercialize, and then eventually may not even need, the subsidy from the government. They'll be successful on their own, and that money can go to other people who do need it. So that's basically the gist of my idea, and that's all I have.
Excellent. I want to share the book informations. Just a and I want to share the book information. The audience, especially we are working with some universities, so those who are interested, they can buy this book. Especially, we are working with North South University, Curtin University, Australia, University of Western Australia. So definitely, it will be very valuable book for all of the student researchers, and also World Talent Economy Forums with the Center of Excellence of North South University. We are developing AI research centers. Already, Mr. Mike in our team as a faculty for AI research, and it will be supported by World Bank and University Grant Commissions, Bangladesh, and any other speakers, those who want to join in our research center as a researchers, you can join, and hopefully we will publish this book in Bangla. So you know that in India and Bangladesh, around the world, we have 300 million Bangladeshi communities. So they may read it in Bangla, and we want to publish it in national news as an article, and all of the uh, things will be helpful for research and innovations. So thank you for your excellent discussions. Mr. Mike, as you are discussing of economic singularities, if you share some of the technological advancement about this economic singularity, especially as we focus on emerging economy. Actually, world populations around 70 to 80% people live in emerging economy. How your book will be benefited for these communities.
Yeah. Primarily, the first step is to start to think about how your community best adjust once the normal types of jobs are being done by robots. Um, I suspect that each country, each locality, each local area is going to have its own approach to how to make it past this point. Both Alan and William were talking about mechanical robots. We're all paying very close attention to Chat GPT because it caught the headlines. The amazing things that it can do in generative AI for art and generating poems and so forth is just astounding. But what I want everybody to watch is this is for this coming up year. Some of the humanoid robots are going to be actually starting to become capable. And I just saw that the CEO of Figure says that its robot is now going to be introduced into the BMW auto assembly line. Okay. This means that it's got enough dexterity and awareness of what it's doing to actually do mechanical work that has now been obviously been taken up by a lot of countries around the world. This sort of manufacturing approach has been a mainstay of how people have risen up out of the agrarian lifestyle into a middle class environment, and now that will be threatened. And so the first step, as we're trying to say, is to be aware of what's coming. That is one thing that the book is expanding on, is not just the threats to your jobs, but also how you might approach what are you going to do about it. Each country will do its own way. So, for example, some countries, I'm sure, are going to decide that the production by robotics is going to be nationalized, and that production will then be shared amongst the people, right? There's other countries that probably are going to institute high levels of taxation against the companies in order to redistribute the cash. There, and that's some of what the discussions are in the chapters in the book. These are the things to watch this year: is do the humanoid robots, do they actually accomplish the same sort of tasks that was earlier mentioned? The Tesla bots were attempting to assemble cars and failed. Do the Tesla bots now become capable enough to do that? Will they be able to do the automatic farming? Will they do the cooking in the restaurants? Will they serve? Will they run the hotels? Is it going to be thorough and ongoing, not just the paperwork style jobs of lawyers and computer programmers, but the hard work of plumbers and electricians or farmers. There's a lot coming at us this year that we have to watch. Now, Dr. Sharif, you mentioned the book. I do want to make it exceedingly clear to everybody listening that this is considered open source by us. The book itself is locked up by Amazon for 90 days. They have exclusive rights to distribute the ebook. The ebook's very inexpensive, but starting on the beginning of May, typically referred to as May Day, the first day of May, would be a day at which we expect to have a freely available PDF. And we're encouraging anybody who wants to convert that book into any language on the earth. We're not that much interested in making a whole lot of money off this book. We want everybody to become aware of the options that they have in front of them for preparing for what's coming at them. Alan was mentioning a little bit about the speed of change. For a long time, it's been relatively slow and linear change in human history. Ray Kurzweil made a big point of saying that things are going to start going nonlinear. And that's kind of the singularity. This is, when we talk about the economic singularity, the problem, the reason we use the term singularity is actually from physics, where the singularity is known from the edge of a black hole, right? You don't know what happens on that event horizon. Singularity refers to something that you can't predict. And none of us really know what's going to happen next. So when Alan's talking about preparing for what's coming, it's a good thing for everybody to start preparing now, because it may come very, very quickly. I hope that everybody enjoys the book. We all want to have as much feedback as possible, things that you think are wrong. We're always looking for new insights into what should be added to this book. It's going to be an ongoing project for us. We don't expect this to be the only edition of this book. We think that as we learn more in the year ahead, we're going to revise and come up with another edition. I certainly hope that my friend Dr. Sharif will write a chapter for this book. I think that that would be a marvelous addition. We are looking for international perspective. You might think that because a lot of us right here are old white Americans, that's the only viewpoint. Oh, and we're all men. No, we want worldwide perspectives on what is the right way to approach this. Why? Because this catastrophe is actually going to be worldwide. The loss of jobs across the world is not going to be isolated to one type of job or one locality. This is something everyone's going to have to face. America is not the only place that's developing this sort of artificial intelligence or these robots. So anyway, it's something for everyone to be very watchful for and prepare properly.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Williams. What role could universal basic income play in addressing income inequalities if robotics and AI come? And second things, I just want to share a perception. Let's say, as I'm from Bangladesh, so we have a huge youth communities, right? Like around from 300 millions Bengali community, around 60 to 70% youth. So more than 150 million youth. And if robotics comes, still we have unemployment problem. We have economic challenge. So how you want to address this challenge?
Thank you for the question. Universal basic income, I think, is one of several solutions. It would have to be some kind of wealth distribution. There are many different options. Some people suggest a negative income tax, but regardless, my ideal thing would be to tax the companies. I'm not in favor of nationalization, because then you lose the entrepreneurial advantage that drives things forward, and we don't want to get rid of that. So I suggest taxing and redistribution. And I looked, I have my references in the full article, but what I've found is when people are displaced from professions, from knowledge workers, they get pushed down the food chain. So they get bumped up from being an engineer, and then they go down one step lower, and the person on the bottom of the rung gets pushed into unemployment. And so I still believe in the value of education and trying to improve yourself. Maybe you may lose your job, but if you have a good education, your young person still gets your education. And then if the profession you go into, say lawyer, becomes obsolete, well, then you'll have the knowledge and the mental flexibility to reposition yourself into something else. So to the young people, don't give up hope, still try. And we always seem to muddle through one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. How might be economic singularity create impact this traditional industry job market? And if you want to give more explanation on that particular issues, because we are working with industry, academy, and government relationship, especially this World Talent Economic Forums, how we can make it more productive. Uh, what's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, again, with the idea of individual preparation, I think the skills of using AI within one's job field, whether that's manufacturing, government, or education, one is knowing those skills and knowing the sort of the specific knowledge of how AI influences one's own discipline and one's own work field. For example, my wife is an educator and has been for over 20 years, and classroom education will be vastly changed once AI can individualize instruction for everyone in the class, essentially, so that they can move at their own pace. And the teacher's role becomes very different. So an educator will still probably be required to help students learn, but they will be working much more one-on-one with students. So that's academia, and specifically about manufacturing. I think it'll be important. For example, there are people that know how to load trucks, and they're amazingly good at it, and they've worked at it for 20 years in the industry, and that's what they do. And those type of people will probably be replaced because there's the dual skill set that I've mentioned. That one is to know specifically about, for example, how to palletize products and load them on trucks. But as that becomes more automated and more intelligently automated, using those intelligent machines to do that task will become important. But also the second sort of skill set, so one is growing with that technology as an individual, but the other is a more broad and generalized type of knowledge about how systems interact. So, how do the trucks that get loaded here, how do they navigate somewhere? How do they get unloaded? How do those products interact or get distributed? That's a key function. And I managed a warehouse for a year and worked on a lot of logistics issues for that company. And what they did was they received truckloads of products, cold, what they call cold, frozen, and dry, or room temperature products. So they received truckload quantities of all of those and then repalletized them as special orders for the clients that needed them. And that was one of the ways I think I was able to help that company the best, is to get their line workers, the people that loaded the trucks, the people that pulled the product, to really understand how those products came together. Dry buns with cold lettuce, with frozen beef patties, and how that needed to get loaded and how quickly that needed to be done, because the restaurant that got sent to, how fast they were consuming that product or putting that product together and selling it for the consumer, right? So Um, those type of things to push that knowledge down to the lowest possible level, so that if their order was, if we were making truckloads for McDonald's or Jack in the Box or any one of the companies that we serviced, those people that were pulling the product, who were palletizing the product, who were loading the product, which conceivably could be mostly robots in the future. But if people are unaware of that broader integration of systems, they won't be able to move up with the company, so to speak. So they'll need to go from doing the job that the robot does to thinking about how the robot should do the job to managing robots, all the way up to integrating products across systems. So that's just one example from manufacturing and really from logistics more than manufacturing, because there's a manufacturing component on the front end of that before it even came to our warehouse. And then the retail project was also a bit of a manufacturer, building burgers, as it were, but or chicken or other high end restaurants also, we service them too. So but food retail. So I think that's really what it boils down to for the individual. How do I shape my skill set? What do I need to look at? What do I need to learn about to sort of stay abreast of working with machines? Yeah. And ultimately, if that's being replaced, retired by a machine, how do I enjoy my retirement? That's the other one right there.
Thank you, Mr. Art Raymond. Like, what you want to discuss about your book and how we get some strategy to develop these economic singularities and reshape these traditional economic activities.
Well, I think probably what I think would be a good strategy is once we have those first batches of people who are going to get, displaced, we need to kind of reach out to them and say, hey, here are some suggestions of what you need to do. One is, reach out to your politicians straight away, and start, getting their attention. So we have to be on the lookout for these displaced groups of people and start giving them advice, tell them about our ideas in the book and just help them kind of cope with that unemployment. Because, the art programs aren't going to be in place yet. I don't expect politicians to be very proactive. So that's something we can do, in the meantime, is we can reach out to these people and start giving them ideas directly on, their options and just any idea that might, spur something in their mind to help them, deal with their unemployment. That's, I think, probably the thing I think we can do. So we can do that. You can do that, and just start helping these people, these groups of people. Once we start finding out who's getting let go. I mean, right now, I think it's Google that, has already let go a bunch of people. A lot of these high tech companies are letting go of programmers. And so, because, they don't need so many. Now they can leverage AI. So they don't need all these people. So, you already have a glut of too many programmers. So what are these programmers going to do when they can't even find a job programming? They need options. They need ideas. They need ideas outside of what they've currently been doing. So, they need to hear what we're telling them. Some of them might be potential artists. They gave up that career in art so they could become that highly paid, software engineer. But now that job is gone and it's not coming back. So we need to get, a hold of these people and sort of market our ideas to them. That's what I think would be a good strategy.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, what's your closing remarks and what comment you want to add for today's session, especially for your book and how student gonna benefit through your book?
Well, I'd like to thank you again, Dr. Sharif, for having us on. This is a very important topic. And I'd like to close by pointing out that part of the reason that I was interested in collecting a series of diverse opinions and putting in this book is because this is how you can start evaluating what might be the right way to approach this problem, rather than selecting something that happens to be a leading candidate or the first thing you think of, or what we're using right now. Evaluate all of them systematically, and attempt some implementations to experiment on whether or not they're good approaches. Now, Art was saying, watch out for the ones who are going to be let go. One of the things that I've focused on is the truth is that there are many, many homeless people and many, many unemployed. And so, even in the richest country on earth, the United States, there's about 2.5 million people who will be checking into homeless shelters. And you can see in the news a lot of folks who live in tent cities. In a previous time that we were on your show, Dr. Sharif, we talked extensively about the left behinds that David Wood talks about and the growing numbers of them. So the truth is that all of the solutions that are put forth, some of those could be implemented on an experimental basis. And so one of the things I'm trying to do, I'm working with a social worker who was on the show with us, Jasmine, on perhaps implementing a market farm with farm worker owner co-ops and taking the folks who are already struggling and see if that is an appropriate application. We know that the US government is not taking care of everyone who's homeless. That's obvious. So we already have this problem. The concern is that it won't be a few million, it'll be tens of millions of people, like in the Great Depression. So anyway, we're going to continue at this point to gather these sorts of approaches and beginning to evaluate them. And we look forward to everyone's input on this. Thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, from our research centers, as our research center focus on housing, artificial intelligence, food, and drinking waters. So we can share your book with our researcher and students. They can evaluate it or they can give their opinions. And maybe next time we can make it more global with your book.
I got one real quick comment, a teaser, Dr. Sharif. As you know, this group is starting to evaluate what we call bioshelters. We got a climate problem going on, a climate change issue. Carbon sequestration is a problem. Homelessness is a problem. We may have some early indications of an approach that might be able to help out with both homelessness and with climate change, carbon sequestration together. And so this is a research aspect that I hope that you and I can collaborate on in the near future.
Excellent. In Bangladesh, right now, I'm working with the housing industries. So we have 250,000 shortage of house every year. So we can work on that. Beside that, in Perth, in Australia, we already have projects to develop tiny home. So any of the collaborations, scientific collaborations and partnership, we are happy to do that from our research center.
That
And
sounds
hopefully,
great.
yeah. In part, we are developing around very small, like 100 tiny home. So definitely your expertise and opinion will be valuable for our real time projects.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. William. What's your closing remarks for today? Yeah.
Well, just to add on to what my follow-up to your question is, all is not hopeless. It looks like we're headed straight down to the bottom, but we're in charge of our future, and we can make changes before we get there and to avoid an economic disaster. It's one of my statistics I saw that for every robot per 1,000 workers, the wages dropped by 0.47%. So If you have 100 more, 10%, 100 more robots per 1,000 workers, then the income would drop 47%. So that's quite a drop. But knowing that that's coming gives us the opportunity to prepare and hopefully avoid a disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. What's your closing remarks?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Mike DeVerde said, that if we can help the homeless and the hungry and develop ways of taking care of those people now, in the event where there's massive unemployment, we'll be in a much better position. We'll have methods and procedures and best practices in place for working with large swaths of the population unemployed. And I think there are regional solutions to that. Just our own research, we've found a whole nexus of various fiber producers and universities and folks that are very effective, all in the Saskatchewan area of Canada. So my thinking is that's the best solution for there, not necessarily the best solution for Texas, which might mean trucking those materials all the way across the nation. So, it may be something like more akin to building adobe houses or something, right? So that would be a rammed earth development might be better here because we have plenty of dirt and we have sun to dry bricks. And so anyway, there's the different set of resources locally that are available, however, can be used to provide shelter, and tiny homes are a great example, or even larger scale facilities. So yeah, I think the better we can serve our unserved communities the better we'll be able to do that later in the event of the economic singularity displacing large swaths of the population. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Artreman, what's your closing remarks for today?
Yeah, I remember you said there was an economic zone there in Bangladesh that you were working with to provide housing. And yeah, I just the idea of don't forget about the arts, including with that project. Put up some murals. When you put up that park, make sure there's a nice mural somewhere nearby on a building or something, or create a wall specifically for a mural that gets done every year by the people who live there. Like a community art mural. So yeah, don't forget about the arts. That's my advice.
Definitely, like we need your help as well. Like if you can design low cost housing, and especially maybe Bangladesh will be different, India will be different, Australia will be different. So based on our idea, our feasibility study, we can share, and you can share your art, and definitely we can make it economically viable and sustainable for our local markets. Because World Talent Economy Forums, beside these research and innovations, we go for real-time projects. From the dialogue, what we learn, we execute it in real life. And we by this test and trial, we are actually improving. So we need a very good teammate like you. We need all of your support. The more you can support, we can help to uplift millions of peoples. This is the way we can help the global communities, and we can learn from each others. The American community can learn from South Asian communities. South Asian community can learn from transhumanist. This is the way we can develop a better world. That is the objective of World Talent Economy Forums. Let's work together and make some progress. Anyone want to add any point for today's sessions, Mr. Mike?
No, I just want to tell you thank you so much for your time. This was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank
What you just said, I think that's brilliant, and we need more of it. So keep doing what you're doing. It's great.
I think from Transhumanist, Mr. Tom also visit Bangladesh. So if you can visit our countries and our projects, I'm sure you will be impressed by our work ethics, impressed by our contribution to the peoples. And hopefully this way you will be part of the history. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.